listening to The Kula Ring, a podcast made for manufacturing marketers. Here are Carman Perry and Jeff White.
Welcome to The Kula Ring, a podcast for manufacturing marketers brought to you by Kula Partners. My name is Jeff White, and joining me today is Carman Perry. How's it going, sir?
Doing well, and you?
It's doing great. The part I neglected to leave out there is that you're the only one joining me today.
Yeah. No, it's just that the listenership just dropped off considerably in the last.
Welcome back, Mom.
Yeah. No, yeah. Look, we've done this in the past a little bit, where we've either just the two of us chatted on the podcast and dove into a topic, or we've interviewed other people at Kula Partners. Usually we've done that because it allows us to maybe go into a more technical topic or something of the sort. But, I think today the reason is that we there's no client-side manufacturing marketer in their right mind who wants to go on record talking about this stuff.
Seems like a career-limiting move.
Yeah. So I guess, guys, cutting to the chase, what we're looking to talk about today is kind of a challenge that we've seen crop up an awful lot in manufacturers, and the relationship, if you will, between the sales organization and the rest of the company, where the salespeople maybe kind of begin to act as a bit of gatekeeper, or they're the barrier between the customer and the company, and it's a real challenge. And but we know by talking to a lot of manufacturing marketers that it's a challenge that they experience acutely.
Yeah, and it's not just something that we've seen in discussions with the podcast. We've experienced it in our own work as well, to varying degrees, that have given us some insight into this idea of salesperson as gatekeeper. And I think it's especially important here because in so many of the relationships within manufacturing that are held in the kinds of sales organizations that they have, the salespeople are often more farmer than hunter, and as a result, they are the most connected to their customers, and that's where a lot of the potential growth lies, which is where the problems come in.
Yeah, I mean, I would even go so far as to say, in some ways, it seems like almost the more niche the market is that any given manufacturer serves, the more likely they are to go to market via a direct sales organization, and in some ways, almost the more likely they are to have a direct sales organization that has deep, often pre-existing relationships with prospects. Often they may be hiring the salesperson because they come with those relationships.
They're bringing those relationships, yeah. And I mean, we're not going to get into this today, but it's interesting too because this notion of the salesperson as owner of the customer relationship, it exists somewhat too in the distributor type relationships too, where the distributors don't necessarily want you talking to their customers if you are the provider or the manufacturer of a certain product.
Yeah, that's an incredibly fair point, and it's a problem essentially for the same reasons, isn't it? It's
Yep.
because talking to customers is kind of important, right? Like we've had a number of guests on this show take us through their voice of customer work that they've done, work that they've done to try to better understand the customer from the marketing department point of view. Work that's been done in product development to get closer to customers and to better understand the problems being solved, etc. So we speak to marketers, customer service people, product dev people, on and on, who beat the drum about how important it is to talk to customers and how dramatically you can alter the outcome of certain initiatives if it's informed by that. So if we're going to recognize that there's a big there in terms of talking to customers is important, then I think it's important for us to talk about the things that stand in the way of that, I guess.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think first and foremost, let's dive in and start to look at the idea of who owns the relationship. Because as you said, in a lot of cases, these sales guys, and they're often guys. I don't mean to exclude women as well, but oftentimes the sales teams are, like you say, bringing previous relationships, perhaps from either competing organizations or organizations within a similar vertical, where their talents might be required somewhere else. So, they're coming along with that and feel some ownership over it. But you argue that it's not really theirs. The customer doesn't belong to them.
Well, I think if a manufacturer is experiencing this problem, if they're noticing that their direct sales organization is kind of keeping them from talking to customers in a more broad way, then in some ways, I guess the salesperson has established in that moment that they own the customer. Um, if what's the old saying, possession's 9/10 of the law, or what have you. well, kind of the similar type of thing here, maybe. If they can successfully keep everybody else from talking to the customer, well, then I guess they effectively own the customer. Um, and I guess what I'm kind of saying is that's a big problem. And so the one of the first steps to solving it is that notion of the company owning the customer. And I think that because what we're talking about is trying to make the change from a salesperson feeling that they own the relationship to the company owning the relationship.
Mm.
And I feel like there's no marketing organization that's going to be able to convince sales to make that shift. That's going to have to be set from the executive level. That has to be a tone from the executive team that says this is what we expect. We expect those customer relationships to be opened up, and we see serving customers as a team sport, and that means that that relationship cannot be owned by one person, and it is a organizational wide mandate to get there. I feel like that's kind of like the only way you can do it.
Yeah. Well, yes, absolutely. I think it should be proclaimed from on high that the it would be awfully difficult, I think, for a salesperson to claim that they own the relationship when you come at it from that perspective. That relationship is a team sport, that we're all serving the same needs. That we have, we might have service, we might have marketing that's going into those channels, to those accounts, what have you, and that the salespeople need to be open to having their customers spoken with. But I do think that there's potentially a slower path to kind of reeling in that customer ownership somewhat. Because in a lot of cases, what we've seen, as you recall, is that especially in organizations that rely on a legacy sales force, is they probably don't have a CRM. So all of that information, all of that relationship data, all of the visits and other back and forth that's occurred is happening outside of anywhere that it can ever be inspected by anybody else. So it may be that kind of introducing a CRM would begin to bring a level of accountability to that could then be used to step to a more, I don't want to say severe, but more specific policy oriented statement about the relationship with customers. Would you say?
Well, I don't know. I mean, part of me thinks you're just delaying the conversation by a millisecond, because basically, like you implement the CRM, which it's amazing. I mean, there are marketing or there are manufacturers, marketing organizations inside of manufacturers listening to this podcast right now. And that manufacturer is a $500 million manufacturer or greater, and they don't have a CRM. It's for the many that do, they must find that very head scratchy. But it's true. So let's say, okay, we're going to, part of this is we're going to get the direct sales organization opening up their relationship with customers because they now need to document it in the CRM. Well, just because you implement the CRM doesn't mean it gets used.
Hmm.
I mean, that's getting more into the stuff that nobody wants to talk about at parties. Um, like that's I would say that it's a CRM being underutilized by the sales team is almost as common as CRM implementations themselves.
Yeah, certainly as common as CRM implementations going wrong.
Well, and then you go through very often the narrative is, oh well, we have the sales team kind of uses the CRM. Some people will put their deals in there, not everybody. Joe, he's retiring in the next 3 years, and it's hard to get him to change to do anything really. So we don't force Joe to do it, but Billy, he's 35 and a real go-getter, and technology is just second nature to him. And I don't know, Jeff. Is it just me, or does it seem to you that an awful lot of manufacturers let their salespeople get away with it?
It does. I think it's because Joe has a really good TikTok account too, and therefore knows what the kids are into. But I mean, you highlight a really interesting problem there. That's probably a great segue to another point. Is that in a lot of organizations that do go to market via direct sales, a lot of that talent is probably heading out the door soon. And therefore, you got to get a tourniquet on this, and you have to pull in that information, because once they're gone, all of that knowledge is gone with them.
Well, but that's just it then. The kind of that tolerance, that coddling of the older salespeople is running exactly counter to that objective you just articulated about basically knowledge transfer and the generational change that's happening in sales teams. So I guess that's why I say maybe we're just delaying the conversation by a second or two, because I think the direction needs to be set at the top, that the company owns the customer, and part of that is every interaction with the customer is captured in the CRM, and that's really not optional. It's optional in the way that paychecks are optional.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Maybe people listening will think I'm being too harsh there, but I think we just need to really be honest with ourselves about that. You've got a guy heading out the door in 3 years' time on early retirement, who hasn't documented any of the relationships, isn't opening the door to even customer service, building a deeper relationship with your customers, etc. That's a serious problem. And when that talent heads out the door, I can tell you that then it's too late to do anything about it.
Yeah, and that one person could be responsible for tens of millions of dollars. Like awfully hard to serve into those organizations if you don't know what the shot is.
Yeah. And what's interesting to think about too is that sometimes when we think of that transition, we think of, okay, well, so and so's retiring, so we need to transition those relationships to the new person. And I think that that's probably the wrong way to think about it too, because transitioning the relationships to the new person just kicks the problem down the road. And while the person that's retiring probably stayed with the company 20 or 30 years, chances of that new person that just came on staying with the company for 5 years is pretty slim. So I think it makes it all the much more kind of important, more imperative that shift to thinking about selling as a team sport, serving customers as a team sport, that needs to happen. We can't have all of our redundancy in one person, like a one-to-one. Okay, we have one salesperson and we've got one person that can be backup for that person. That doesn't really work.
No, especially when it's so close to the money. You can't have that. I think though that we're being somewhat harsh on salespeople right now, and sometimes deservedly so, but not always. And I do think that marketing has a responsibility here as well, that when the sales team is opening up to those discussions and providing that information, that marketing can give some value back. And I think this is really where, if you think back to our recent conversation with Cynthia Kellum at TE Connectivity, they almost talking to their customers too much. That may not be possible. We talked to her a little bit about potential survey fatigue and things like that. But, the building of the profile of the opportunity within your customer body, that's something that marketing can do and that others within the organization can do that is going to provide real value to the sales team down the road. Kind of really starting to get to understand that customer on a level that is not just, handshakes, golf rounds, and steak dinners.
Yeah, I think the way I would encourage salespeople to open up to the idea, the way I'd encourage them to think about it is to say, these people have permission to ask questions that you don't have permission to ask.
Yeah.
Or they will just, and even if they ask the same questions that you ask as a salesperson, they may get different answers. Because the person perceives that their answer is going to be received in a different way, or they may be just more open and honest with somebody who they don't feel has a direct commission-based relationship at play, right? That could be the case with even in those times when the salesperson and the person they're selling to have really become friends over the years. Like, so often we're talking about relationships. We're talking about friendships. Like, they may have attended each other's children's weddings, kind of thing. Like,
Yeah.
But with that familiarity also comes more things that I may guard against as in my conversation. I may not be as willing. For instance, if I'm a customer and I'm that close to my salesperson, I may not be as open with a salesperson when things have kind of gone a little sideways. I may not want to be as harsh or as direct.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it is a bit of a gift to the salesperson if they can open up to that and say, I may get new information here that I just otherwise wouldn't be able to get, and that may help me upsell more. I may be able to cross-sell into this organization better, et cetera. But this brings up a good point, Jeff. The person being gatekeep from those customer relationships sometimes are other salespeople. We see it so often. A manufacturer goes and they buy. The mergers and acquisition play is happening, and they're incorporating a new product or service offering into their core, and they're going to sell it into their existing customer base. And all of the salespeople responsible for all those existing relationships are like, yeah, we're not talking to my customer about that. I don't want you to talk to them about X when I've been busy making bank selling them Y for the last 10 years. Like, don't mess up a good thing.
Yeah.
How often is that? Like, we think about, they're keeping, these gatekeepers are keeping marketers away. They're keeping customer service people away or C-suite people away. But often it's other salespeople they're keeping away too.
Man, that is a really interesting point. I remember an episode we recorded a couple of years ago, John Eklund, Promoc, who was the VP of marketing, I think. If that's the wrong title, I apologize, John. But it basically had written the playbook about how they integrate new brands that they buy, a very aggressive M&A organization. And part of that, if you recall, was also ensuring that the sales teams were immediately plugged into each other's information so that the cross-sell could happen from the get-go. So that they're really starting to see value very quickly from their mergers and acquisitions, and they're not spending a whole whack of time trying to figure out who owns what and why Jimmy from the US can't talk to, Jean in, in Berlin or something like that, So it's pretty interesting. I also think too, you talked a bit about how some salespeople may not be comfortable with certain lines of questioning. I think that can also play into potentially using a third party like an outside agency or a survey firm or somebody like that to kind of go in and begin to ask those questions that the sales team can't, because sometimes the relationships at that exact moment may not be on the best of footing for whatever reason.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can open up these relationships and get additional information in a lot of different ways, be that third party or just other different departments or what have you. But the only way you're going to get there is if the person that's gatekeeping is no longer acting in that role, right?
Yeah.
That's really the nut that we're trying to crack. And we talked about that notion of setting the tone from the top around company owning the relationship, and kind of that notion of CRM compliance is a must these days. I mean, guys, it's 2022. You got to put your stuff in the CRM. Everybody oh well, they don't really like technology. Meanwhile, buddy's on the can in the washroom placing his sports bets on his app, right? We're just lying to ourselves, thinking that the CRM's too difficult to use. We're just letting people away with crap, and we need to, I think, get over ourselves about that.
But to be fair, some CRMs are very difficult to use.
Sure, but
there may be better options than what people might have.
Yeah, so get a better one, or just buckle up, princess, and learn to use the one you got. It's probably not impossible, right?
Yeah.
So there we are, beating up on the salespeople maybe a little bit. So let's flip it a bit and say that the last bit of advice I would have is that I think in trying to make this shift and trying to say the company owns these relationships, and guys, we need to be putting the stuff in the CRM, that you need to honor the sales function when making this change. So often I've seen organizations change their compensation structure, as an example, at the same time as they're trying to say the company owns the accounts.
The surefire way to lose people before you ever captured their data.
Well, yeah, or they may say something like, we'll continue to pick on our soon-to-retire Joe here, fictitious Joe. He's 43. He's going to take early retirement package in a few years.
Wait, you get to retire at 43?
I said, did I say 43? 53.
Ooh, I was going to say, I'm a little late.
Yeah. Now you distracted me. I don't even know. Okay, so we've got our 50-some-odd year old salesperson, and we're making this change, and they'll say, okay, we're going to team you up with more of a sales admin person or what have you, and they're going to take over a lot of the day-to-day on this account or that account. And now, by the way, the commission structures are going to be kind of shared amongst the team too, and so they start mucking about with that, and it's like, no. Everything you do here cannot decode to the salesperson like you're disrespecting what it is they bring to the table. In fact, you need to almost double down on respecting it. You need to find probably a way, as much as it kills you as a manager, maybe, I don't know, but you need to say, look, when our team upsells an existing customer and that salesperson had nothing to do with it, you may even need to give that salesperson the same commission they would have gotten otherwise. You still may need to comp them at that account level, and honor that function more than is maybe what your instinct would be. Does that make sense?
It does. Do you think it continues indefinitely?
Well, no, because Joe's retiring in a few years.
The planned obsolescence model of commission-based selling.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. Like, other people will join the organization under a different rule book and under a different set of expectations, and that evolution can happen. But I just think it's a recipe for failure to make too much change too fast in this, and the change that will piss off a salesperson more than any other is the comp change.
Yeah, probably very limited appetite for that sort of discussion.
I remember an organization I used to work in, and the VP of sales once told me, he's like, I'll tell you one thing right now that every sales guy in this organization understands. They know every time the CFO starts talking about a comp plan change that they're losing and the company's winning.
like the house in Vegas.
They're immediately suspicious. There's just no way this is for my good. This is for somebody else's. And I think the thing that people that aren't in sales benefit from and appreciate about people who are in sales is they'll have that tough money conversation when nobody else will.
Yeah.
So these people are people who are more likely to be motivated by money than a lot of other positions, and they understand the money more than other positions. So avoid making in fact, even find ways to be more generous with the comp as you move to a team-based approach versus the other.
It's definitely more carrot than stick in that model, especially if you're implementing things that are otherwise going to be painful. Like you can't be like beating everybody from both ends.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Maybe I don't know. Really, it brings about quite a visual.
This is the other thing we can get into when we don't have a guest.
Exactly right.
Entirely different topics, but I mean, I think it's also worthwhile. We could probably link up some other episodes in the show notes just about organizations that have had tremendous benefit from spending more time talking to customers, and not just from a sales perspective, but from, I'm thinking of Chris Witt from Tektronix that we recently had on the show. Their entire product development process is now voice of the customer driven. When you begin to embed that kind of thinking in the DNA of the company overall, it's probably an easier pill to swallow than if you're just kind of switching how the sales team needs to work.
Yeah, but if you're an organization with this gatekeeper problem that we're talking about, and you just listen to that Chris Witt episode of the podcast, part of you is probably thinking, we can't get there from here, right? Like, yeah, sure, we could have a much more innovative and reliable product development program that was, better serving customers by talking to customers throughout it, but there's something that's standing in the way of that. So I guess that's that's what I'm hoping today's show gives people something, a lens to think about, to look through as they think about that problem, to say, okay, how do we begin to make that change? How do we shift away from the salespeople as gatekeepers and get to a more team-based approach that allows this other innovation to come about?
Yeah, and I think that's really where I think we should leave it, is just, this is an essential thing. All organizations are going to have to face this at some point in the next decade, I would say. And if you're looking at your sales organization right now and going, I really don't know who to even talk to at customer XYZ, then you may have probably, we can do a 1-question diagnostic for you.
Exactly right. Yeah. I think that people that have that problem kind of they very much know it. Like it's a daily frustration for them in some way. They may not see it as something that stands in the way of a corporate-wide innovation initiative or something, but they certainly experience the problem. And for those folks, I think, again, the 3 tips are, you got to find that executive champion to really make sure that we could set that tone from the top that the company owns the relation, not the person. And with that, I think you can drive some of that CRM compliance that we know is vital. And if you make those changes and get that team-based approach working inside of a structure that honors the salesperson's contribution and does not seek to compensate them less or even differently, then I think you're well on your way to being able to make those changes.
Great points. Thanks a lot, Carman.
Likewise, sir. Pleasure.
Thanks for listening to The Kula Ring with Carman Perry and Jeff White. Don't miss a single manufacturing marketing insight. Subscribe now at kulapartners.com/The Kula Ring. That's KULApartners.com/The Kula Ring.